Right, welcome. We just have a few folks trickling in. Great, welcome everyone. Today is our session on social crypto. My name is Shreyas. I'm the founder of Llama, which is a dashboard to help crypto communities manage their treasury. And I'm joined by three amazing builders in the space. So excited to get into that. The event is supported by Ethereum Foundation and DevFolio. And I'll just give a shout out to Denver D'Souza from DevFolio, who's done a great job to help with logistics for this event. But yeah, we'll, let me just check with Denver to make sure everything is recording and going okay. Great. So yeah, so we'll probably just get started with intros. So maybe Brian and then Alex and James, if you could start off with just your background and your experience and exposure to social crypto.
Hey everyone, my name is Brian. I got started in crypto about 4 years ago, right after launch of CryptoKitties and NFTs. I wrote a newsletter for about 2 years on NFTs. It was really deep down that rabbit hole. I worked at Dapper Labs, creator of CryptoKitties, for about 2 years, doing product stuff mostly. On the game and application side of things, then eventually left Dapper at the end or at the beginning of last year to start my own company called RabbitHole, which is a platform to earn crypto tokens in different platforms by doing on-chain tasks. So that's a little bit about me.
Awesome. Alex?
Hi everyone, I'm Alex. I've been in crypto for also probably around 4 years, building more seriously for the last 2. So won a bunch of awards at ETH Cape Town in 2019, and then started my current project as a hackathon project for ETH Online and C Club back in October last year. And we're building Unite.community, which is a platform for incentivizing fan engagement using social tokens. So you can create campaigns to distribute tokens to people for taking actions like retweeting content on Twitter or being more engaged across different platforms. And then they can use those tokens to unlock access to exclusive content and perks and things like that.
Awesome. My name is James Young. Thank you for having me. I got into crypto a while ago, Bitcoin and then Ethereum. So I've been in Bitcoin since I think 2013, and then moved to Ethereum in about 2015. Co-authored the white paper for AdChain, which talked about this token curated registry. Also helped launch the first layer 2 payment channel on Ethereum mainnet. I was VP of engineering at SpankChain, also core dev for a DAO framework called Moloch. And then about a year and a half ago, started Abridged. We have a counterfactual wallet with meta transactions in layer 2. It's a lot of words there. And most recently launched a consumer product called Collab.Land. We're serving over 800 tokenized communities. We have over 60,000 token holders that are using our system. And we're on Telegram and Discord, and actively looking at Reddit for, I guess, known reasons. So that's me.
Awesome. maybe we could start with Collab.Land, because I think that's an interesting project that might give some color on the social crypto space. Can you just describe in more detail what Collab.Land is and how it exactly helps some of these communities?
Yeah, the Collab.Land is really simple conceptually. What it does on Telegram and Discord is map your platform username to a wallet address. And what you can do as an admin of a channel or a Discord server is you set up a token address and a minimum threshold. And everyone that's in that channel that onboards via Collab.Land is a bot that is an admin to that channel. The bot will make sure that that user holds a certain amount of a specific token. And if they don't, the bot just will kick that user out. So the concept is really simple. So if you're in a chat room or a channel with the Collab.Land bot, you can be assured that everyone else in the channel holds along with you a certain token with a certain minimum amount. And the concept is really simple, but we found it's like interesting from a psychological perspective, because everyone else is bought in. So everyone else holds a certain token. There's just a different level of conversation that happens because that everyone else holds that token. They know that you do as well. And so we've seen really interesting kind of coordination that happens just by knowing that. So there was a token called Meme, and it started out as a joke. And the only feature that it had was a private channel where you had to hold 100 meme. And so random people over the internet bought the token, thought this was a good idea, got into the channel, and then said, hey, we should do something here. 14 days later, they came out with this concept of NFT farming. Because back in, I think this was like August or September, DeFi was all the rage. And they wanted to make NFTs, more approachable. And we could talk about NFTs as well. And so they came up with this mashup of farming, yield, but being able to access NFTs, which has been really fascinating because, when I started out building out Moloch, which is a decentralized autonomous organization framework, and we can talk about DAOs as well, what I had seen was, and I'm part of this community called Metacartel, what I had seen become successful is having an online community that had no token and then put on crypto after, when the foundation was set. And I saw that was successful. And my mental model was, okay, you need to have a community first and then tokenize later. If you start with a token, you can get all these like weird incentive. You have like this weird extrinsic speculative incentive for a token, which can be orthogonal to the motivations or the values of a community. But then I saw Meme as a joke come in. It was just random people who, were in it for the meme that got in, and then they were able to start. So it's really fascinating to see how really simple tools could help shape and just, I guess, influence just online communities. And so I'm still kind of trying to reason about it. Do you start a community with the trust-based model without a token first? Or can you have a community that starts out transactionally with a token and then build up that trust?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. And I'd love to get Brian's thoughts on that. And as you're talking about that, also just maybe describe what Jam is and broadly what social tokens are and how you think that they get value.
Yeah, for sure. So last year I did an experiment and I launched a social token called Jam. And social tokens are basically they're like normal cryptocurrencies, except they're tied to a particular social cause connection between different community members. And when creating Jam, I was already writing a newsletter on Substack, and the goal of the token was to get better price discovery for the content in itself. And the idea is if I wrote more articles, then I'd be able to actually price the content better than having a flat subscription fee each month of say $5. So then it would be holding a certain amount of cryptocurrency tokens or social tokens. In this case, it was 1,000 tokens for actually holding tokens in your wallet to get access to the content. And so we launched that in about August of last year. And we got a bunch of people involved, including Shreyas and Alex, who were part of that community, just experimenting with different ways to actually use that social token in itself. And it comes back to James' question of whether, whether you can form these community ties before launching a social token or have some sort of financial incentive and alignment between these community members. And that was kind of like one of the most interesting questions we were kind of grappling with at the time. A lot of people in the social token space often talk about audience versus community. And I was trying to sort of transition between, having an audience for the newsletter and having this token to having community where it can actually empower community members to take up some contributions on their own and provide value to the token by doing their own different management duties, whether it was helping manage a treasury of these tokens or being able to contribute directly to the newsletter itself and earn a slice of contribution for providing value to the newsletter and helping grow the subscriber base. All these different things were culminated in kind of this one social token. And it was really kind of the breath of Jam in itself.
Awesome. Alex, can you maybe talk a little bit more about Unite? And you did a few cool experiments with social token communities. Just what your learnings from that were. I think you hit on an important problem initially, which is distribution of tokens. And I'm just curious, just your learnings from doing that, and also what your plans are with Unite going forward.
Sure, yeah. So I'll give a quick backstory because it's sort of interesting and related to the topic. So how we came to work on Unite is I was randomly researching this smart contract insurance protocol, Nexus Mutual. And there's a meme community on Twitter around Nexus Mutual. So there's like the synthetic Spartans for synthetics and the Chainlink Marines for Chainlink, and there's the Nexus Mutants. And I saw one of the mutants talk about how if you add the hashtag NXM to a Twitter bio, they'll give you a mutant token that gives you access to a private Telegram group. They're like secret castle chat. And I thought that was really interesting. This idea of like, if you view your Twitter bio as a little billboard that you own, you're like spending your social capital by putting something on that billboard, and then you get a token that gives you access to something. And I like try to figure out how this works, what's going on. I discovered Collab.Land. They're using Collab.Land to mediate access to the Telegram group. And then I went down this whole rabbit hole of social tokens. And I saw a panel discussion actually with Brian and also Alex Mismej, who has a token, and Cooper Turley. And they were all saying that distribution is like quite a challenge with social tokens. So I suggested on the Twitter thread in reply to something that Alex Mismej said, I was like, why don't you try do something like this Nexus Mutant thing, but even simpler than like something with your bio? Why don't you just give tokens to people who engage on Twitter, like people who retweet or follow you? And he tried it. He did this like manual social experiment where he gave $5 in Alex token to the first 100 people who follow and retweet, and got the 100 in 17 minutes and grew the token holders by 25%. But it was this manual process where he like DM people like, hey, what's your address? Like getting them these tokens. And Twitter stopped him from sending DMs. Like he looked like he was spamming people. So for the hackathons, like we ended up just building an automated solution to that, where instead of pushing the tokens on people, Unite in the beginning was just a way to do that more easily. So you deposit your tokens in a smart contract to distribute them, and then we have a bot that goes and checks like, okay, Shreyas has retweeted Brian's tweet, therefore he can withdraw some of Brian's tokens from the smart contract. And then we ran some of these campaigns on mainnet for a few communities. One of the big challenges, and something that Brian rightly anticipated, is like there's a lot of spam, and there's this problem called the Sybil resistance problem, where, I mean, Sybil, I think it gets its name from a sort of like psychiatric case where someone had multiple personalities. And so a Sybil attack is where one person can create many accounts. And so like, you know, you can create a campaign where you say, I'll give tokens to people for retweeting, and then one person just creates 100 accounts and gets all those tokens. And we did have some of that kind of behavior with the campaigns that we ran, where people weren't really engaging with the content. They were just trying to get free tokens. And then we ran a campaign for another social token community called Friends with Benefits, where you had to already be in the community to claim tokens. And that worked much better. There wasn't a way to spam those campaigns. Since then, we've been sort of like thinking a lot more about the space and evolved from just a tool to distribute tokens to trying to build a sort of full stack solution, so that anyone that wants to create a tokenized community and not just create tokens and distribute them, but also make them useful, where, you know, Brian mentioned holding tokens to access a newsletter. There's a whole lot of other interesting things, and accessing a newsletter that we think are going to be interesting, where, you know, people can create incentives so that their community and fans are rewarded for participating and helping grow the community, and then their rewards give them access to perks like exclusive content or unreleased material or calls with the creator or things like that. So that's what we're doing now.
Great. Can you give an example of a social token community that you think is particularly interesting and a good case study, I guess, and maybe just walk through details of what they've done that you know, makes it a good case study? Any of you guys?
Yeah, I can go. So there is a token community called RNG, stands for a random number generator. It's actually led by a venture capitalist. His name is Richard Kim from Galaxy Interactive. And it's a little bit different than what you would expect, at least from my opinion, of a tokenized community. They're typically, what happens with a token community is you'll have a token, you'll, in the Collab.Land case, use a Collab.Land bot to have different tiered access. You have members of the community just level up by having different thresholds in terms of token access. And you buy these tokens on Uniswap. And a lot of the problem that you see are speculators or bots even buying the token and then dumping. And so you see this spike and then it goes down, and then sometimes it can recover, sometimes it won't. And there's this notion of like extrinsic and intrinsic value that I was talking about or alluded to before. And in RNG, Richard does not provide liquidity for the token at all. He refuses to. And the only thing, the only way to like get more tokens is to be active in the community and get tipped tokens. And so people in the community tip each other. And it's kind of this acknowledgement, this kudos thing. And what's interesting about the community, it's half crypto and half game developers. And so when you talk about mechanism design, tokens, economies, this is something that there's like 20 years of literature on. And you have like people like Rav Koster in that Discord group. He's like legendary. You know, he's been in the gaming industry, has a few books out, Theory of Fun. He has Postmortems, which is another book. And just having access to a mind like that is just phenomenal. I mean, that's kind of the magic of the internet. And then put on top of that, being able to understand the context of what it means to have, you know, magic internet money, and in this community of people you can just talk to that have years of experience. I think that's really fascinating. And the, you know, kind of looking at that community, what I've seen is that, you know, we in crypto think like, oh, we have all these like interesting problems regarding like speculation, extrinsic versus intrinsic. How do you build a community? How do you do all this? And actually a lot of the similar parallel questions have been answered in the course of this 20-year research with MMOs, building huge online communities in games. And so I think that's just fascinating to watch. And, you know, it's a mix of this academic kind of, how do you build communities, games. They also have, you know, things like poker and book clubs, which are kind of common now in these tokenized communities for people to like hang out kind of online. So it's a great kind of mix. And what they're really mindful of is like, once a community has evolved to a certain state, everyone that's part of that community kind of understands and has been there to build up the culture. But if someone fresh outside of the community would jump in, they're like, okay, what is going on? So it's this, and this is also taken from gaming. And this is what has been talked about. What is the mastery path to being a core community member? And so it's interesting to like see a lot of these notions that are taken from gaming that are like well established, and then map them on with the little twist of what crypto provides. Yeah, I think that, you know, what you're seeing also with, you know, what's going on, you know, with Wall Street Bets, GameStop, AMC, Doge, all of this is now becoming kind of mainstream. These type of dynamics have occurred in crypto for many years, and now moved on to Reddit, and you know, it's mainstream. Whereas like, I think with RNG and these communities is kind of inverse. You're seeing a lot of online managing of huge communities in a game being mapped now into you know, crypto. So I do think like with social tokens, social crypto, whatever you want to call it, there's going to be this like collision course between like Web 2 and Web 3. You know, Elon Musk just put in his Twitter bio, as Alex was saying, in your little billboard, he just put Bitcoin. So I think like there's going to be this year, whether it's the drop back of the like pandemic and everyone being more online now, an interest in financial systems in general, a very interesting time. I think that though, we're all humans, and if you understand the foundations of what it takes to build an online community, the principles remain the same. It's just that the tools are now updated, and how do we use crypto, scarce digital asset, to enhance how we coordinate online.
Yeah, great points. Neil in the chat asked what the liquidity looks like for personal or community tokens. Can one of you maybe take that? Just and also if there are ideas to you know, there is sometimes a liquidity problem with social tokens, ideas to solve that.
Yeah, it's not only liquidity. It's you know, when you're starting a community with the gas prices right now, Why would you ever want to transfer a social token if the value is not that great and you're paying more in gas fees? So I think that in general, liquidity is an issue. I think that in the context again here, when it comes to now this is a little slightly different, and I think Brian talked about like audience versus community. I think you see this momentum here where creators and influencers on like YouTube or Instagram, they're getting demonetized. And there's this gap that is accruing where the top 1% of the 1% gets a lot of the revenue, and it's just harder to be able to earn on a platform. And so I think you'll see creators create tokens. And from a liquidity perspective, I think that there is an interesting dynamic for, you know, the first 100 or 1,000 true fans of that creator to become potentially liquidity providers, where 1% of the community or the audience provides liquidity, the 99%, you know, may hold the token, but they're not going to provide liquidity. And the LP token, it can be this like badge, if you will, when it comes to showing that you're like a super fan or a true fan or a day one fan, if you will. But then on top of that, I think there is going to need to be a solution when it comes to layer 2. Else there's really, you know, it's hard to get it off the ground. Like if your token doesn't have much value and you're trying to create value for your token, but financially it doesn't make sense to transfer the token, you know, I see that as a big barrier. I also see that there are a lot of kind of to talk about like the issues when it comes to social tokens. I think that there is a psychological issue for these creators as well, because the blockchain is immutable, which is great. And as a technologist, you're like, this is awesome. But then when you look at it from a creator side, you know, that has a few million subs, they're like, what am I going to get myself into? The downside risk of having to like support a shitcoin for the rest of your life. You're like, wait, I don't know if I want to do that or not. So I think that there are a few of these barriers: liquidity, layer 2, kind of the psychological and understanding of what I'm going to get into. You know, the great thing is blockchain is immutable, but you know, the blockchain never forgets. And what that means is like the blockchain never forgives. So people are treading very lightly when it comes to what does this all mean. So all of this kind of like hampers experimentation from like a practical usage perspective. So I think it's like these, as a technologist, as a builder, have to take these things into consideration when you're deciding what tools to build. It's easy to understand at like a steady state what tools are going to be needed. And, you know, in an ideal world, when everyone has social tokens, what does that mean? And what tools do I need to build? I think we're not at that phase yet. As builders, we're still at this kind of bootstrap phase. How do we solve these very specific market problems? And I think that's where a lot of the energy will need to put in, you know, kind of like any social network. Facebook started at Harvard. They took it, you know, and sell a local market need first to bootstrap. Uber started with just black cars, right? You have to get that beachhead, and we need to figure out the tools to be able to capture this beachhead first, and then we can grow out. Because you know, everyone has great ideas if, you know, they had a billion user social network, but how do you get to that point is really the key question here as we think about what to build.
Alex, could you maybe walk through, for someone who is new to Web3, just what it took to build Unite, just some details of you built it over this hackathon, like what resources would be helpful for someone getting started, what existing sort of crypto Legos you used, and you know, things like that.
Yeah. Well, it depends on what you're building. In our case, we built a web application that has a smart contract. and has API integrations. So I can quickly just like outline what's going on with Unite, and then I'll try to like make that generalizable and give some guidance. So we have a web application in React. For the hackathon, we used Ethers.js to connect the web application to various Ethereum wallets. And so that's how you like allow a user to log in with their MetaMask or using Wallet Connect, and facilitate the user calling smart contract functions. And then we have a backend in Python that like talks to the Twitter API and also talks to our smart contract. And then the smart contract's written in Solidity. So I think like a lot of projects will have a structure that looks something like that. In terms of getting started, Austin Griffith has a great scaffold ETH project. So if you just, maybe I'll post it in the chat. That's a sort of like starter kit for getting going with building Web3 projects. So I'll point people in that direction. That's a good thing to start with.
Yeah, I second that. Cool. Shifting gears to NFTs. Brian, could you first describe what NFTs are? And I'm curious what your experience at CryptoKitties was with NFTs and how the space has evolved over the last few years.
Yeah, for sure. So in late 2017, Dapper Labs launched CryptoKitties, which was a digital collectible game that allowed users to breed different digital cats together. And it was quite the success and very kind of speculative in the early days. And a lot of cats ended up, selling for as high as $200,000. But it really kind of opened up the floodgates into this new category of digital assets called non-fungible tokens, or NFTs, as we're saying. But just the idea of that now anyone can kind of issue and create their own digital collectibles that live on chain with unique IDs was sort of kind of the breakthrough here. And it's been evolving over the past couple of years. There's a lot of digital artists now that are selling one-of-one unique artworks that are entirely digital and on chain for thousands of dollars. Even a lot of music artists right now selling audio NFTs, an audio file attached with some media content for thousands of dollars as well. Just because simply that the people want to own these things from the creator themselves, right? It's sort of a digital memorabilia almost from these creators. And that's been kind of happening side by side with social tokens because they're kind of complementary primitives in itself. And so at Dapper, we are mostly focused sort of on the IP angle of things. So just working with different media companies, IP companies like the NBA, for example, and having different collectibles based upon this IP. And I think the more interesting side of things is definitely more of this user-generated side, where anyone can issue and create their own NFTs as a new way to monetize their own work without feeling tied to a token in itself. And a lot of creators today are kind of grappling with this decision between whether they should launch a social token or whether they should just create NFTs. And we're kind of seeing, at least right now, a lot of people lean towards NFTs, at least as a preliminary stage, because it's very frictionless to start minting these different unique tokens and selling them to different users. Because it's again, they're not tied to these tokens in itself, and it's sort of like a a digital lemonade stand. They can just set up, sell it, and then sell another ones that they want. It just lives as a digital collectible. So it's been interesting to kind of see that evolve in itself. And I think we're starting to see different types of media NFTs as well. Someone just sold a future article as a NFT in itself. And so it's starting to get pretty interesting.
What would you say? We have a question in the chat. What would you? Oh, James, do you want to answer that? Just what about the argument of why can't I just take a screenshot of this NFT? How would you respond to that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And why can't I just copy it? Well, it's the same thing. Like I can go to the Louvre and I can take a picture of the Mona Lisa. Why is the Mona Lisa valuable? Right. So I think it's a great question, because I think NFTs is not about being able to showcase art or a digital asset. Really, when you peel back, what an NFT really is, it's like a license, proof of ownership. And so you have this license and showing through cryptography who owns the original art piece, that digital art piece, where its provenance is from, where it comes from, and who owns it. And that data secured through cryptography is then just glued to the actual art piece itself. And I think digital art, and even now expanding to writing, as Brian was saying, is kind of the obvious thing. But I think you'll see more ownership use cases of NFTs. My experience in, I launched the TCR white paper for AdChain to help with online advertising fraud. An NFT could represent ad space on a publisher website who has rights to that, and you can sell that. So that's another novel case of NFT. So it may be that we start out with something visual via digital art, audio, music, or something written like a newsletter, but it's really about ownership, and it's really about rights more than anything else. I hope that helps answer the question.
Yeah, that's helpful. Cool. Could we maybe talk about some of the open problems to solve in social crypto? So if someone wanted to hack on a project, like what tools do you think would be useful to build in this space?
I can jump in. I don't know if I'm talking too much though.
Yeah, he's good.
So get hard hat. It used to be called Bidler as a tool. You're gonna want that. What I've seen is with the Ethereum community, especially, go into these Discords, talk, and ask questions. I think the biggest thing about the Ethereum community that I really love is everyone is so helpful, and you're still really early on, and there are a lot of issues to be solved from a tooling perspective. But yeah, get hard hat. And then what I would recommend, if you're really interested in taking social crypto seriously, is look at layer 2 solutions. There's Matic, there's Optimism, Connext. There is like a bunch of layer 2 solutions that did not exist even a year ago. And we need a whole new thinking in terms of developers that are going to be thinking in layer 2 first, because any mechanism designed for a social token is never really going to happen or get off the ground unless you can solve for like these gas prices. And so that gets into a whole onboarding issue when it comes to how do you onboard into layer 2 first. But I would say that, look into that, look into wallet providers, look into what the differences are between, Magic and MetaMask and Taurus and Argent. So that is going to be kind of a user experience thing that you're going to want to look at because a user is going to need a wallet, and how you're going to deal with that. But I think that once you have kind of that groundwork, it's really about getting an understanding of things that we hinted at here, like what does it mean to have liquidity? And so I'd look at, DEXs like Uniswap, Balancer, for example. And the thing about crypto, if you really are serious about it, you want to start from a technical, and I have too, from a builder perspective. There are only so many tools, but I think you're going to need kind of a well-rounded understanding. And as a builder, you're going to be needing to understand the concepts of like financial engineering, of like being a game designer when you're building, and also kind of this, if you're doing social crypto, understand how groups form. So having these foundations in like sociology, game design, trading and investing, these are like longer term. Like if you were to get a bachelor in blockchain, I think the technical aspects and understanding the computer science aspect of it is probably like a quarter of it. But in order to really have a well-rounded understanding of what it means to build into crypto, you're going to have these the knowledge of these other disciplines. And I think this is why, it's not like a lot of people understand in these different silos, but what Web3 does is it mashes all of these things together because the technology is getting commoditized. So you as a developer, career-wise, I think, need to think about it and have your edge in terms of what, along with programming and building, do you want to focus in on? The economic side, the game side, potentially even like the legal side. So you have to have and wear many different hats if you want to be really productive and useful as a developer. So that is what I would say. But for like a hackathon or like, just starting out and trying to get into Web3, the tools are Hard Hat. It used to be Truffle, but it feels like, at least in my opinion, that like Truffle was kind of, I don't know, kind of the older, if you will, kind of jQuery of Web3. And then now you have React, which is more of like the hard hat aspect. So I don't know if the analogy totally holds, but there's this evolution in Web3. So I would point people to Hard Hat, to Tenderly from like a building dev perspective. But be mindful more than anything else as you're getting into this, in terms of like, there's a whole world to explore. There's a whole problem space that just becomes like super multidimensional when you talk about crypto. It can be overwhelming, but it's super exciting. And like, let your curiosity lead you.
Great, that's helpful. Alex, do you want to maybe talk about one or two open problems you'd like to be solved in social crypto?
Man. I think identity is a really interesting one, and one that I think Brian's got some great thoughts on too. So that's a big one. I also think, if you think about what you can do with social crypto in terms of storing state on Ethereum instead of inside of Facebook and Twitter's databases, thinking about like what other social mechanisms would need to exist under that regime where state is now publicly accessible. Like how do you do things like recommending, profiles to each other? That's an interesting problem space to look at. How do you do things like liking content? Where is that stored? I think, looking at the kinds of primitives that exist in Web 2, but haven't yet been built out in Web 3. And then considering, like what is now possible that you couldn't do in Web 2 that you can do in Web 3. I think those are the sort of lenses that I would look at the space and try to think about like what can be built. And then overlaying like what can be built in a hackathon on top of that is another layer, especially when like you don't have the experience to know how long something's going to take.
But yeah, that's the approach I take.
Cool. Brian, do you have anything to add to that list?
Yeah, one interesting thing is that there's a lot of creators selling NFTs across like these different platforms, and all of that is on-chain data, and that can be tied to specific on-chain reputation, because there's either programmable royalties, and you can have sort of this on-chain social graph between all the people that are involved, either with a particular NFT or a social token in itself. And just being able to make sense of that that social graph on chain, I think is a really important unsolved problem that I think a lot of people have tried from different angles. But it seems like one of those things that needs to be cracked. And if someone can pull it off, it can do really well. So I think that's kind of the biggest thing.
Great. All right, so I'll go over some of the questions that we have. When does a token become a security? I don't know if you guys are legal experts, but anyone have a good take on that?
So talking with social crypto, I would assume that your token is like, if I'm going to approach it, 99.999% of the time is going to be security. And so there's a great article when it comes to, if you're not going to have your token, and if you want it to be a utility, what does that mean? Vitalik actually wrote an article. It's a little bit dense, so you may take some time to get through it. Let me see if I can find it. But essentially what it talks about is medium of exchange tokens. And this has been something at the protocol level. Now we're seeing at the social level that people are talking about in terms of the utility of the token. And what you want to try to avoid is like a medium of exchange token, because the game or the economics, the game theory doesn't really stand, and it doesn't allow the value to accrue to the token. So this is why I think for the most part, you know, there are these little landmines and traps that you can go down, which I think can be important for learning, but really don't answer the heart of the question. And so the way I would approach it, in order to like really get to the point, kind of the cliff notes or the shortcut into like getting up to speed, it's not about like learning about consensus mechanism. It's not about learning the in-depth between what's a optimistic roll-up versus like a payment channel. You know, those type of things. Know that they exist, and in this sense, don't really get down the rabbit hole of a security versus a utility token, because as a builder, that's not going to be as useful. Like you want to like understand the problem that you want to solve. There's a question here that I'll dovetail into that talks about, you know, how should one start a social crypto startup? I think that's a great question, but I would rephrase that question. And what I would ask back is like, what problem do you want to solve? Like spend the time to research the problem space first before trying to like understand trying to come up with a solution. Because I think if you try to really understand the problem space, join these Discord communities. You can go to Forefront and you can look at, you know, where a bunch of these communities are. You know, you look at external metrics like their market cap to be able to see, okay, how well these different groups are doing, buy into their token, join the community, see what problems they're really facing. I think that one of the big problems that no one really talks about that I've seen over and over again when it comes to token communities are these like online, you know, these community curators or leaders, right? It's mentally taxing, and there's a mental health issue because you have this this tug of war when it comes to people like wanting to pump the token and the short-term incentives versus the long-term value of the community. So it can't, tokens can become toxic. how do you not make those tokens toxic? These are the tools, these are the things that we need to build, whether it's metrics, dashboards to figure out how well or the health of a community is. These are the things that really, if you dig deep into social crypto or social tokens, that are going to inevitably need to be addressed.
So, I mean, I can try to directly answer the security legal question, because we've had a lot of conversations about this, just real quick. So basically, the test that, like, in determining whether something's a security, generally what's done is a test called the Howey test is applied, which asks, or rather classifies something as a security if a person is investing money in a common enterprise and led to expect profits solely from the efforts of a promoter or third party. So there's 4 sort of like criteria to the Howey test, and all 4 have to be met for something to be deemed a security. So investing money, common enterprise, expecting profits, and efforts of others. So Ruben Bramanathan, who did legal at Coinbase and is now at IDEO, wrote a great article on this sort of securities considerations around social and community tokens. I just linked it in the chat. And he talks about 3 pathways to like likely having a legal social token. Now, there's no real precedent. It's already early, but basically like one path is for there to be no investment of money. So tokens just being distributed, like the Grammy-winning musician RAC did a community token. He just gave it away, didn't sell it. In that case, because there's no financial consideration, it's probably not a security. The second is if the community is owned by the community, or if the token is owned by the community, and the project is owned by the community, and it's not solely on dependent on the efforts of a third party, then it's probably not a security. And the third path he mentioned is if there's genuinely no expectation of profits. So yeah, like the article I think outlines some of the legal details and whether social tokens are securities or not.
Cool. That was helpful. I think on the lean startup versus build the whole thing out mode, I guess my take would be social crypto is a little more amenable to building something quickly and iterating versus say like launching a stable coin or something. Would you guys tend to agree on that that model probably works to build something quickly and iterate?
Yeah, what's great is that you can build in public with your community, and you talk to your community, and it's like this community first development where you're just solving their problems, and then that is where the demand is generated from. So you're not going away, in your coding room or whatever, coming back 6 months later and build it and they will come. I think with crypto and how it moves so quickly is just always having tight engagement with your community or a specific community. So understanding the problem space, I think, is required first. Spend time and understand the problem space, and then engage a community and iterate that way when it comes to kind of lean development is what I would recommend.
Cool.
Yeah, I think moving fast and breaking things is potentially dangerous with securities law, but yeah, I think you really it's also early iteration with feedback is really important. So yeah, finding a balance there is, I think, tricky, but yeah, I think iteration is definitely the way to go.
Yeah, it's hard though, because again, the blockchain never forgives. So once you put something out there, it's going to be out there. And if it's a bug, you have to be careful because you're talking about the transfer of value here. So yeah, you definitely, want to be careful. You can move fast, but understand when you're doing crypto, you are talking at the very beginning of the conversation at a different level of stake, right? It's high, it can be high stakes. So it's like managing that. I mean, I remember, maybe this is just me, I'm very conservative. Like even now, whenever I do a transaction, I always send a test transaction, right? And I remember launching my first smart contracts, like I couldn't sleep for 2 or 3 days prior to something going live because you're just racking your brain to try to see if there's an attack vector or something. Because in the Byzantine environment, where it can be very hostile. You know, there's this great book, The Three Bodies Problem, that talks about the dark forest. And a lot of people make analogies and Ethereum being this dark forest. And it's true. And so you have to be very, very careful, because there are, you know, and people don't really talk about this, but there are tons and tons of bots that already exist that are, you know, looking for vulnerabilities. So as soon as a smart contract is deployed, there's scripts that run to see reentrancy attacks, things like that. So you have to be very, very careful.
Great points. One of the questions is, any ideas about connecting NFTs with the physical world?
Go to MetaFactory, Google MetaFactory. They're doing a lot of great things when it comes to metafactory.ai, I think is the URL. They have a robot token. Sounds like I'm shilling them, but they're doing a lot of like great stuff when it comes to fashion and physical wearables. There's Kong, KONG.cash, which you know, puts a chip onto different things. They're putting it on a bill right now, but like a paper bill. But like you can do that. I think Beeple is going to have some type of physical artwork along with his digital artwork, his NFT. But yeah, that space is just starting to grow.
Ryan, do you have thoughts on this?
No, I think James answered it pretty well. Yeah.
Cool. What are your thoughts on one of the questions, that the crypto space being overcrowded with, I'm guessing, a lot of social tokens? Just how do you maybe find signal in the noise, to use Jam's tagline?
Yeah.
The curating problem, I guess.
So if you kind of predict where the crypto space might go for 5 years, it's likely that everyone that has a social media account also has a social token in some form or way, whether they're part of something or they've issued their own. But there's probably going to be millions of them. And a lot of them probably won't have liquidity. Probably a lot of them will only have one or two token holders. And so there will be a need for curation of these different social tokens and being able to group them up, of seeing what's actually valuable and what's not. And just like how newsletters and other media platforms today kind of like curate different news, like there will be, I think everyone will be a curator and sort of like a more meta level than just the minters. And they'll be more responsible for kind of funneling value between the minter of these tokens and the people who are looking to purchase them. And then there'll be programmable cash flows or even affiliate fees kind of built into these curators that can let them earn a small slice of fees for presenting those tokens to the different users. So I don't think curators right now are, I think it's Forefront is probably the best form of curation for social tokens. And it's just having 15 or 20 different social tokens that kind of exists right now. But we'll probably see more variants of Forefront over the next couple of years as more people mint social tokens. James, I think you might have a lot more thoughts on this.
Oh yeah, no, I think that, I'm old enough to witness when people are saying, who's ever going to write a blog, right? And I think it's this mental shift because we don't see this reality now. And I agree with Brian that everyone will have probably a social token. I don't know what it's going to look like and what that filter is going to be. How do you decipher your signal to noise ratio? It may be a search engine that says, okay, I want to filter out for all the addresses and people that hold similar tokens that I hold. And so it's not like the tokens are your identity, but the tokens are what you are paying attention to because those are what you're holding. And I want to see, okay, tokens that other people are holding that also hold about 80% of my tokens. So I can like discover new tokens. It might be something like that. It might be aggregators, like Brian said, when it comes to Forefront. I think, this is where you can imagine, because the medium is different, how we approach the problem is going to be novel. And there's going to be this emergent design property there to be able to filter. Just like PageRank with Google on, Backrub in terms of the backlinks. And this is how Google does the PageRank. I think there's going to be things like that when it comes to social tokens that you're going to hold. And that's going to serve as part of that like filtering mechanism. And like, who knows, with like GPT-3 and what AI can emerge that will help with this and be able to predict. Maybe there is people that have not held similar tokens as you, but now do. Maybe there's this like rate of change to see where things are trending, what things are interesting, the velocity of shared token interest or something like that. I think we need to get to a critical mass first of token holdings to be able to understand what that means. Because I don't know if we can yet really imagine that world yet. So it's a great question. I don't really know what this will potentially look like. But you got to keep an open mind so that you can, absorb this new information.
Great. We're getting close to 9 p.m. IST. So to close out, I think maybe if each of you could just walk through what your like 3 to 5 year like vision for social crypto is, how you think this space will play out. Alex, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. So I agree with Brian when he says, everyone will have social tokens, be that holding other people's social tokens or having their own. I think viewing social tokens as nodes in a social graph is probably how it's going to play out. And I think there's all kinds of interesting discovery stuff to do there. To James's earlier point around like collaborative filtering, recommending tokens based on what other people's holdings. And then I think there's going to be a lot of interesting incentives, mechanisms, and games going on there around unlocking access to content and to people themselves through holding tokens and sending tokens around. Like famous people have way more DMs than they can possibly read, using things like holding tokens to gate who they respond to and mediate their attention. I think there's probably going to be some interesting NFT related part of this whole story. I think people talk about NFTs as distinct from social tokens, but I think NFTs are already a kind of social token. Yeah, I'm really excited to see how it plays out.
Awesome. Brian?
Yeah, just trying to echo my own thoughts before everyone having their own social token. I think the easiest part would be everyone issuing their own NFTs and social tokens being built on top of NFTs. Likely that, if we think about the different utility use cases for social tokens, that there will be some sort of like Webflow like platform where we'll basically be able to mint a token and then plug into different smart contracts very easily, kind of have that built-in utility. And so it would be really easy to create your own token, being able to really manage your own liquidity and kind of plug and play, no coding required. And yeah, very intertwined with NFTs because it's kind of a complementary primitive to social tokens.
Great. James?
Yeah, I think if social tokens take off, you'll see a much more secular world. I think you're going to kind of like, from a dystopic point of view, what's happening with Wall Street bets are going to be like a daily occurrence, but on a smaller scale with different groups of people coordinating. So I think that like, it's going to be interesting how we negotiate that social contract online because tokens are a way to align incentives. And those incentives could be any incentive for good or bad. and you have extrinsic value attached to those as incentives. And so I think, we want to be thoughtful and careful as we are builders in this, and not look at this with a naive lens. So I think it's just trying to be as thoughtful, and there's a responsibility that we all have as builders. I think that there are people that, in the internet, Google, what was Google's first, kind of byline? Don't be evil. They've gotten rid of it. Because 25 years ago, no one understood what the impact of social media could have. Like here in the US, it could be attributed to like an insurrection in the White House. Like if something can be weaponized, it will be. So we got to be very careful and tread lightly, I think. And it's just kind of a somber thing as we are excited and enthusiastic about getting into crypto and what this could all mean, being thoughtful of kind of the why and not just doing it because it can be done kind of thing. But I think with social tokens, inevitable, like from a sociological perspective, that the world is going to get a lot more secular, a lot more closed groups with their own economies that are running. And so what does that impact on culture, on society, online, being borderless? What does that mean? I'm not exactly sure.
Great. Yeah, it's great to end on that note. This was a helpful session, and I do recommend folks to follow Brian, Alex, and James. They have interesting thoughts in the space. And thanks everyone for attending, and it should be available on DevFolio's YouTube channel over the next few days. And our next session is on DeFi next week. So thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah. Thanks for having us.
Good luck.